Hello again, everybody. My name is Haikel. Thank you for joining this webinar. I'm the head for Southeast Asia region at Telum Media, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Really excited for this one. Before we begin, let me quickly give you a quick rundown of how today's session will run. So this will go on for about 1 hour. I will introduce you to our speaker shortly, and then he will be taking you through a little presentation and speech. Thereafter, I will run a Q&A session with him. I will be helping you to also ask your questions that you may have. So please do submit these anytime during the webinar or anytime during the session itself. To do this, you can click on the Q&A icon, which is at the bottom of your Zoom control panel. So if you've got a question, please do ask. But if you don't have one, but you see a question that you quite like, you can give it a vote. So it goes to the top of the list and we'll try to give it the priority that it deserves as best as we can. Lastly, we have a short feedback form for you to fill at the end of this session. I promise you it will just take you 2 minutes. So please do assist us in sharing what you think of today's webinar. It will really help us understand what kinds of content to put together for our future ones. Thank you very much. With that, let me introduce you to Oliver Stelling, whom we are very lucky to have here today. Oliver is the author of a book launched last week titled CommunicAsian, and Oliver is an independent advisor with 25 years of experience in corporate and government communications in Asia. He's also spent time working with various organizations in Malaysia, China, and also the Middle East. Oliver, thanks for being with us today. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks, Haikel. It's my pleasure to join you today. Telum Media's approach to connect media and PR professionals in order to drive targeted media engagement and informed decision-making is very much in line with the core objectives of my book. So this is very good.
Brilliant. We will have you share your presentation, which I will do right now, and you can take us through it.
Thanks very much. One main point of my book is the need to change some long-established practices and value propositions in communications. With greater connectivity, there's also an increase in regional and global trade, travel, and dialogue among cultures. All these are positive outcomes, but that's not all. The global community gets more exposed to worldviews many are unfamiliar with. And that often causes outright rejection instead of efforts to better understand these views. The shifting spheres of influence affect international relations, policymaking, public diplomacy, and public affairs. And no one in communications can ignore that. The stunning progress made by Asian technocracies demonstrates how vision, mission, and determination can advance national development and reputations at a speed previously unseen. So PR practitioners must not only learn to adapt, but also adapt faster. This requires a refocus on innovation in tech and strategy development and more insight into the historical and cultural backgrounds of the markets they are operating in. The best way to get there is to watch and listen, to embrace purpose, openness, diversity, inclusion, and trust building, and adhere to truthfulness. And as I'll lay out later, adapting the concept of speed and strategy. Speaking of listening, I've got some great contributions and insights from communications practitioners, academics, and experts in nation branding, soft power, AI, and data analytics, and HR. Their perspectives added real value to my book. And before I forget, if you want to get the book at a discount, Taylor and Francis offered a discount for all attendees, 20%. Just use the code AEV23 when you go to the website. So what I wanted to achieve is a positive reader's journey based on a chapter structure that mirrors the process of developing a sustainable strategy. So let's get started, chapter 1. So this is decoding the Asian century. Asia, as everyone here today will know, is home to 4.7 billion people. That's about 61% of the world's population. And influenced by Asia's rise, the 21st century has already gained its de facto trademark, the Asian century. West Asia, aka the Middle East, for example, is in the midst of a massive construction boom and invests a lot in big tech. Central Asia, India, China, Japan, and the ASEAN nations are also spending billions of dollars on roads and rail networks, renewable energy, AI, education, and public health. And much of that has triggered inclusive growth, as well as regional and global integration, and also great narratives. The tallest tower, the fastest train, the largest airport. Asian leaders definitely know how to attract talent, entrepreneurs, investors, and also how to influence global opinions about the emerging markets. As all PRs know, strategy development should begin with a situation analysis. And in this age, this goes beyond the usual desk research and interviews about business records and media perceptions. Knowledge about history is as revealing as a closer inspection of cultural history, the impact of geoeconomics, and the definition of future readiness and globalization in a more multipolar world where no single power can control the global narrative anymore. Communicators can also benefit from paying more attention to the superior research by thinkers and scholars from various lines of academic study who have laid the foundations of communication theory. Communication versus communications. Western communication theory is rooted in philosophy, sociology, anthropology, and linguistics. But there's also Asian communication theory, but it's based on something else. The classic works of Chinese and Indian philosophies, mainly, that emerged over thousands of years. Both are hard to compare, but there is much to learn about the basic tenets of people-to-people communication, the successful management of intercultural dialogue, and methods to foster voluntary sharing and advocacy. One key point is to move on from one-dimensional sender-receiver models, which describe the transmission of predetermined and fixed content from one head to the other. How a message is received depends on the way it is encoded by its sender, through verbal, paraverbal, and nonverbal means, and the degree to which the recipient can decode it. Another point was brought up by Alfred Schütz, a philosopher. It's the shift from intentional action from because motives to in order to motives. The latter is about acting based on one's envisioned future, and that improves positioning and messaging exercises and the resulting vision and mission statements and narratives. Together, this is more likely to resonate with audiences since it addresses the ever-present question, what's in it for me? Paul Watzlawick's 5 axioms of communication also added a whole range of new perspectives. The best known is one cannot not communicate. Not engaging sends a message too, just not the desired one. All this displays how important it is to shift to a more purposeful approach to communications. So years of declining public trust in institutions, corporations, media, and government should prompt a serious review of the actual value proposition. Rebuilding trust can gain a lot from the perceived authenticity of the speaker. However, that is not about claiming authenticity as part of the core messaging. As Robert Phillips, former CEO of Edelman Europe, has written in his book, Trust Me, PR is Dead. It's not dead yet, but it was a very popular book. He said, trust is not a function of PR. It is an outcome, not a message. So the focus for communicators should be on what resonates most with audiences. In short, purpose and shared values. And the best way to get there is the progression from classic PR and mere storytelling to a more inclusive approach empowered by full executive authority. Storytelling is still part of it, but you need more power. The industry's most visionary and experienced leaders obviously know that emerging getting in touch with board members and shaping business and public diplomacy strategies reduces the odds of misunderstandings about the content, available time window, and expected results. And that also heralds a higher degree of longevity of the comms strategies, as the buy-in from senior management translates to a high degree of risk insurance. That is a secure and fast way to shape tomorrow by achieving the desired outcomes. Getting involved in strategic decisions is better than having to weigh options after business decisions have been made. And besides using individual aspiration as a way to inspire others. So let's talk about inspiration and from aspiration to inspiration. When communicators plan to gain executive power in order to secure more internal and external influence, it is vital to envision an organization's future and to articulate what it holds for all stakeholders. By definition, this includes narratives teeming with ideas, anything that creates influence via aspiration and inspiration. I'm addressing this by examining the rise of some Asian nations that managed to attract plenty of investors, trade partners, employees, and tourists. For emerging markets, there is an analogy that delivers the desired results. It's the positioning as the nation-state equivalent of a corporate startup. Startups are the companies that people admire because of their innovative and pioneering solutions to eminent problems. Or in West Asia or the Middle East, there is one place that benefited a lot from that, Dubai. The Emirate has mastered the art of engagement of both the East and the West via a more inclusive, coordinated, and participatory process that highlights the upsides of innovation-led development. The UAE already reports the highest number of unicorn companies in the region and also the highest growth in corporate startups. Now it is up to communicators to embark on innovation-led communications. And that commands proactive, open, and transparent communications, accountability, and, as I said before, a willingness to listen. Truth should also always prevail in the process, but we also have to adapt to the rise of propaganda. I think everyone knows that the fast spread of misinformation and disinformation, especially via digital platforms, has created a global communication crisis that constitutes a significant threat to society. We are now living in a post-truth and post-fact world that calls for more efforts to expose propaganda tactics in order to raise greater awareness of all inherent risks and consequences. So the promotion of critical thinking and media literacy carries a real commitment to ethical principles, which can rebuild public confidence and trust. And while some governments, investigative journalists, and fact checkers are already actively supporting this concept, the sheer amount of disinformation requires a more integrated approach. So my point is that the time has come for communicators to join in that effort. And it is equally important to establish some ground rules and consensus about what defines the red lines between diverging opinions, freedom of speech, and the intentional distortion of truth. Since most propaganda is covert, its disclosure must be overt, telling it like it is. At the same time, one has to go to great lengths to avert intolerance, a rise in paranoia, and descent into racism, vitriol, chauvinism, and xenophobia. We don't want that. The openness to other worldviews remains critical, and much of that falls to diplomacy, above all, public diplomacy. And what I'm writing in that chapter is about leveraging the strong side of soft power. In the age of digital globalization, international relations and diplomacy can no longer rely on trying to exert absolute control over national narratives. Achieving the desired outcomes depends on real influence via a more inclusive approach, such as the involvement of non-state actors, a focus on audience participation, and content that makes national stories more relatable across cultures. None of that can ever be captured by one actor in single encounters. Effectively managing the national positioning requires close synergy between all government agencies and a preconceived master narrative that can be shared and then be personalized by artists, athletes, and brand ambassadors, all without having to engineer every single content detail. The upside of broadening diplomacy and preparing for planned and unplanned encounters in new settings, both physical and digital, is more than evident that it does outweigh all perceived risks. I'm quoting a number of examples from Asian nations that made enormous progress in digital and cultural diplomacy. Corporate communications pros should now take a closer look at that because it is a future-proof path of balancing values and principles in order to unlock the full potential of soft power and influence public opinion. So the more convincing the efforts to prioritize pull, not push, the higher the chances of avoiding unsustainable competition in global markets. It all hinges on the people, or to put it another way, on human capital. So I was writing about new talent strategies. In any people business, talent management should always be at the top. Being in the midst of a global talent war, an all-inclusive review of long-established talent strategies has become essential. So updating the candidate selection criteria is as important as is the future orientation and skills of senior leaders and HR teams. They are the ones that must create a satisfying candidate journey and assemble a diverse and therefore future-proof workforce. And there's more. Generational values are always changing. And now we see that younger generations like millennials and Gen Zers are progressive and place greater emphasis on trustworthiness, activism, and advocacy. So this is the audience communicators must know how to engage with, as they will shape the global dialogue in the future. And they're also going to be the future leaders, of course. So when human capital is seen as valuable as capital, the opportunities are limitless. But the general progression of HR is still at a relatively early stage, even in future-oriented societies. It is for that reason that HR departments must invest in DEI programs and policies, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as new tech such as talent intelligence systems, testing and assessment tools, and interviewing tools. And when teams come up with ways to utilize solid data analysis and real measurement to enhance strategies based on structured assessments and feedback mechanisms on a stable and predictable progression of communications, this is then literally guaranteed. So let's talk about big data and AI. Of course, everyone knows about ChatGPT. That came up 2 weeks after I delivered my book manuscript. So there's not too much about that in the book. But we know obviously that we can benefit a lot from accumulating some kind of a digital sixth sense. While the technology is still far from perfect and also comes with ethical concerns, like, as I just said, ChatGPT, the opportunities that AI and data analytics present are profound. And by gaining access to new, relevant, and protected data sources, and having the right toolkit and analysts in place to measure performance, It is easier then to predict stakeholder preferences and reactions and to extract insights into the efficiency of current and future outreach activities to target audiences. Of course, all of the above changes, but technology evolves all the time, but certain aspects are likely to remain. So it's time to use the automated analysis of published content, speeches, including language patterns and tone, presentations, media appearances, and overall public sentiment. And businesses should also review the impact of the rapid digitization of customer interaction on their perceptions. The newly available data points will help accelerate the generation of better strategies. And that might finally secure for PRs the much touted fifth seat at the boardroom table, which again is about executive authority and decision-making power. And once that is accomplished, it certainly helps in environments where things have to move much faster. So let's move on to Shenzhen speed and Dubai spirit, engineering the Asianization of communications. With senior leaders and junior talent beginning to integrate tech and data analytics into day-to-day PR operations, they are laying the foundation for adjusting to speed and strategy. Zoom founder Eric Yuan made it crystal clear. In business, speed is everything. And Piyush Goyal, India's Minister of Commerce and Industry, he made a similar case. He said the speed of decision-making is the essence of good governance. So once communicators accept this new reality, the ability to make swift yet profound decisions should become a top priority. There are still many, though, who argue this doesn't work, like don't act without a plan. But you can have a plan even in fast-moving operating environments. As said, there's much to learn from the well-articulated vision, narratives, and determination of some of the emerging world's leading nations. The key takeaway is this: combining speed and strategy is not only possible, but in fact a winning formula. On the top of the list should be a shared vision and an associated communication strategy and rollout plan. And this is then the conclusion of everything that I write about in the book. I call it access and beat. So what is access and beat? Well, I chose to set out a two-pronged path to the development of future-proof corporate and public affairs strategies that incorporate the conclusions from the previous chapters. The one is an inspirational one, and the other one is an aspirational approach. However, both deliver real outcomes in a variety of geographic and business environments. What remains critical for long-term success is to secure top-level support, as communications can no longer function in isolation. Achieving active participation of senior executives and getting their opinions is needed at literally every stage of the planning process, as well as the campaign rollout. Besides, they are the ones to approve the acquisition and use of new AI toolkit. And they must also be convinced to place a greater emphasis on renewed talent strategies and purpose and shared values. So without senior buy-in and endorsement, building and protecting reputations is going to be much harder to accomplish. Again, that leaves organizations with just one sensible option: to scale up communications with top leaders and are committed to deliver tangible outcomes based on a more holistic and inclusive approach. So access is agility, creativity, and can-do, entrepreneurship, strategy, and stuff. And beat is building and earning authority and trust. That's the essence of it. Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly ask you, maybe firstly, what actually drove you to put this book together, and who do you think will benefit most from picking it up? You spoke about how startups could benefit from it, how millennials and Gen Zs could benefit from it. But does it cover really anyone who is working in comms right now?
Yeah, so to get to the first part of your question, I spent, as you said, 25 years in communications across Asia, and that exposed me to diverse cultures and subcultures and forms of governance and business environments. And that made me rethink the role of communications in the wider context of geopolitics, economics, big tech, and diplomacy. And then I read a fantastic book. It's called The Future's Asian, written by Parakana, who is in Singapore. That inspired me a lot. And the COVID lockdowns also changed connectivity for 2 years plus. But then we saw the rise of Zoom meetings, and it made it possible to connect with more people around the world, especially think tanks, academics, and other experts in webinars. And that also opened new doors for intense conversations and gaining new insights. And as the pandemic dragged on, I realized time has come to write the book finally. So part two of your question, who will benefit the most? Well, my intent is to appeal to an international audience, including seasoned practitioners, business leaders, and academics in the East and West, and likewise older and younger generations, including those in PR, diplomacy, and students in international relations and mass communication. So what I did is I adjusted my writing style and added reference that I sure hope will work for them. Plus, as I said, it's written with an outcome-focused approach and emphasizing the upsides of innovation-led communications. To me, that included creating a reader's journey that resembles the process of crafting future-ready strategies. So as I said before, each chapter builds on the last, helping readers to connect all points made and realize their significance while they begin to envision the best approach to their own strategies.
So yeah, you covered quite a bit about the opportunities part of things in communications in Asia. Are there some like really big challenges that you see right now that is happening in Asia in terms of making it a little bit difficult in practicing communication, specifically for Asia?
That's a good question. Asia is a vast and highly diverse continent, or to use a better term, a mega region. Among the biggest challenges is the political and digital divide between these regions. And in some countries, regulatory frameworks, respect for authority, restrictions on internet usage, censorship, and government control over media can impact the exchange and flow of information, and also the development then of communication strategies. There is one example that came out just a few days ago. India's Minister for Road Transport and Highways, Nitin Gadkari, asked Elon Musk not to sell China-made Tesla cars in India. Tesla should make cars in India and sell in India and export from India. So clearly, one single narrative won't work across all of Asia. You have to adapt it. So some developing countries also don't have the same access to digital communication tools and platforms as Asia's leading nations. Engaging audiences across all of Asia can therefore be harder, but it sure helps to have multinational teams who know exactly how to connect. And that's what I address in the chapter 7. So different linguistic and cultural boundaries also come with some other challenges. So navigating them requires a similar approach to managing communications across the East and the West. And all this then calls for a master plan that aligns the main components of all messages with narratives that connect with publics in various localities. This is the new challenge. All communications is local, but it could be global at the same time.
I think that leads to a question sent by Vivian Go, who's on this session today. Vivian, thanks so much for the question. Vivian's asking, how can we do strategic communications in China for an American company and vice versa if you're a Chinese company for brand comms in the US market? So I repeat that. So doing communications in China for an American company and vice versa. If you're a Chinese company in the US market?
Yeah. Chinese in the US market or US in the Chinese market? So what was it?
So if you are you're doing communications in China for an American company and vice versa, if you're a Chinese company for brand comms in the US market.
Yeah, well, I think what you need to always focus on is keeping transparency at the top of everything, and make sure that what you say and what you do is linked. So the disconnect between words and action never works in view of a global audience, even if you have a focus on a particular market, but people all over the world can follow this on Twitter and other social media. And what you say and what you do needs to be aligned. And my argument is that transparency makes a huge difference. And if you can stick to that and engage with people in a way they want to engage with you, then you have a discourse, you have a conversation that will basically make you more trustworthy and give you the results that you want. And you will learn if you hold back some information that you don't want to share, but you get responses from your audiences. And that is also the same thing in diplomacy, where you can no longer just push your own message. It's not about push, it's also about pull, it's about real engagement. If you master that and put that at the top of your agenda, then the chances are you can relate to and resonate with audiences, and that gets you the outcomes that you want, not just in corporate communications or in public diplomacy, but also in brand communications.
Thanks very much, Oliver. And that leads to my next question, actually, because obviously trust is a big factor in disinformation as well. And you tackled this, I believe it was chapter 5 it is. And I was just wondering, how do you see, how communicators can maybe promote into critical thinking and also media literacy to challenge and combat misinformation and disinformation in the media?
Yeah, this is a very good question too. For communication pros, there are several openings here to deliver on purpose and shared values, not by acting like self-styled legal experts, but by seeking collaboration with subject matter experts equally keen to reveal the truth. Given that literally all professionals in the information space have to find new ways to deal with the intense surge of falsehoods and manipulations, the willingness to team up with others to convey the tactics behind and the damage caused by propaganda might in fact be seen as a welcome move. The main objective would be to help people detect and combat fake news while holding spin doctors and apologists publicly accountable. And that's what I call finding the North Star or true North. In fact, Barack Obama spoke about the true North. It's something that should really help regaining trust in PR. At the center of that is the promotion of critical thinking and media literacy, and a move that comes with a commitment to ethical principles. And while some governments and investigative journalists and fact checkers are already actively supporting this concept, the sheer amount of disinformation requires a more integrated approach. So the time has come for communicators to join in the effort. I suppose many here know Ali Velshi, and in NBC, MSNBC. When I see him on MSNBC currently, he talks about this. He's the Canadian TV host and senior economic and business correspondent. For the past weeks, he appeared in an ad where he reminds viewers of his role. This is what he said: "My work is to facilitate a dialogue. All of us are better off when we're around people with different backgrounds and perspectives. And the only way we effectively speak truth to power is by truly understanding all sides of an argument." I think that's a good point. Facilitate dialogue, but speaking truth to power. That sounds like an invite for PR pros to connect. Collaboration can even be expanded by partnering with mass communication scholars, legal advisors, analysts, ethics experts, and policymakers. And some think tanks are obviously researching and partnering with other relevant stakeholders to boost literacy and achieve this change that we need. And communicators can support all this by engaging their contacts, contributing to research pieces, contributing to media articles, and by citing the various strands of online and offline disinformation they encounter and how they interweave to create distortion. And beyond that, they can secure support from clients who see a clear upside for their operating environment and a greater public good.
Yeah.
And so they can also use insight gained from global conversations to enlighten audience about different worldviews and how they affect dialogues.
I think that this is the key thing there in terms of getting together. I think what we're facing right now in the comms industry is the fact that if we want to challenge disinformation, we can't do it single-handedly. I think no single brand, no single PR company out there will be able to handle it just by themselves. We've got another question here, and might I just remind everyone else to submit your questions through the Q&A panel and not through the chat. Otherwise, I may miss it because there's quite a short screen I have on my end to look at the chat channel. So if you put your questions in the chat panel, please put it in the Q&A forum so I can see it later on. So this is about speed, and you tackled this in one of your chapters as well. So they did not leave the names, but the person's asking, if acting at speed in the absence of a formal plan in your book, do you recommend at least a framework or guidelines be established, or is it just key to act as quickly as possible and resolve issues, i.e. apologize later? So, you know, if we want to respond quickly and make a mistake, do we just apologize later?
Yeah, so this is addressed in the book, and the point that I make is that in order to get this right and not create a bit of havoc for yourself because you put all of a sudden speed at the top, that is to get involved with board members, with key decision makers, the people that have come up with the business strategy, with the policies. They know what they want. They just don't know exactly how communication works and helping them to get there. But that's the point that I make. If we gain more executive power and become involved in the decision-making and strategy development, then we can work with them to work out the steps on the roadmap and how fast we lay it out to achieve our desired results. And that is exactly the point that I make in the last chapter, when I talk about the way to involve people at that level and engage with them. That's the key idea. Now, I cannot go through all the details here right now, but it's a step-by-step list of what can be done. And it starts at the early beginning of the situation analysis.
So you need to get the book, basically, so to get I mean, some of those answers. But obviously, we don't have all the time to obviously address all the key points that we may have picked out in your book, Oliver. There's a question from Alex Lakey, and they are asking, outside of building trust and authority, what do you think should be a measurable key performance indicator for PR teams across Asia? Yeah, measuring is always an issue in PR. So is there an important KPI, you think?
I would start with diversity in the teams that you assemble, because once you have diverse teams, and I should be saying this because in my 25 years in Asia, in various parts of Asia, I always had very diverse teams, not just locals, but people from all parts of the world. And that helped to then engage with people in other parts of the world when you have an international client. It's not just the languages that they speak, but it's also the way to understand the background, the cultural diversity and all this. So this would be the start. And in terms of KPIs, outside of building trust and authority, I think it is about, how do you get people at the senior level involved. If you manage that, then you get kind of risk insurance in your strategy development, because they agreed with you before you rolled it out. And by the way, I'm talking about campaign rollouts. I'm not talking about singular events or special events only. The best way to do it is you have a campaign and you know what will happen at what time, and you can announce that before, in 3 months we will achieve this and that, and then you can show that you actually did achieve it. So again, the KPI, your internal KPI for teams is to get those who know how to engage senior decision makers and get invited to the boardroom and become part of this whole process. That to me is very important. I've been through this in a case in Malaysia 20 years ago, where it worked fantastically. And that was before social media, before the digital age. But there was only 4 days to get a key press conference done about a government decision. And this is all laid out in the book, and it worked. The decision makers, obviously the politicians, knew what they were doing, but the PR team had to adjust. And the way to do that was to bring in senior people, to make sure that when they sit with the Minister of Finance, I'm talking about the Asian financial crisis here, then you need to have the power to make your point, but you need to listen also, connect, and get the right outcomes. So that was key.
That actually links to the next question from Brian, actually, who's asking, how do you persuade senior leadership in investing, listening and to engage with you? Because getting into that boardroom to begin with is very difficult, Oliver.
It is. That's what so many agencies are talking about. We need to get the 5th seat at the boardroom table. I've heard it for 10, 15 years. And obviously we know that management consultants somehow managed very well to get there, right? They are not communications pros, but they try to get more communications pros into their organizations. That's why they buy companies all over the place. But they know that they can get this access to the senior decision makers. And for us to get there too means we have to broaden our understanding of the operating environment. Those who are used to meet with marketing heads know how to do branding and brand communications, and there's nothing wrong with that. But these are not typically the key decision makers in an organization or in a government, right? So in order to engage them, broaden your understanding of what is driving their decision making, what is this based on, what is the history, what is the cultural background. And then if you bring all this together, then you look at it through the filter of communications planning. And that means the key thing is agility. So you cannot use one way of doing this and think that must work for all situations. You need to always be open for change, because especially in Asia, the operating environment changes all the time, very quickly, but not the expectations. The expectations are the same. Give us the best output. And so it's not just about pretending we are strategists, but we're actually looking at tactics. It's combining both, right? But yeah, this is a challenge. This is still a progression that is underway. And to get there is something that we have to work on. And some of the details are, again, in the book.
I think you're spot on that, because obviously Asia is a mammoth of a continent, and there can be no one way for us to get into a boardroom in one market versus another. I think it constitutes different strategies and tactics, as you said. But I wanted to touch on brand communications. You mentioned the importance of brand communications as well. And have you got examples from your experience where, because of a good, effective brand communications in Asia, it propelled that business forward? Is there anything that has happened for a brand coming to Asia with effective communication strategies and plans have increased its branding and its presence?
I have been working with brands, but I'll be transparent here. I'm not necessarily the brand comm specialist. I was always more in corporate communications and involved with governments and authorities. I can give one example here. Maybe it works in this context. And this is Malaysia. And it's about a nation brand. This is about Expo 2020 in Dubai, which happened 1 year later, but the name remained the same. And it was the first World Fair in the Middle East. Total of 192 nations, state pavilions presented their country's future preparedness. And most of the larger countries displayed tech from the moment one entered the pavilion. But the 10 ASEAN states, plus a number of Pacific nations and African states, chose another approach, starting with arts and culture, plus the wonders of their natural world. Most teams wanted to also speak to visitors, a commitment to real stakeholder engagement. And in doing so, these nations managed to create emotional bonds before trying to make everyone aware of their great achievements in tech, commodities, and sustainability. And Malaysia stood out, and I know the PR people there. I engaged with them a lot, and they clearly had a strategy, what they were doing. And the global visibility increased significantly thanks to the highly popular Zero Carbon Pavilion. The country won a gold award at the BIE Day Awards ceremony. BIE is the Bureau International des Expositions. That's the organization that organizes the expos. And so this was all in recognition of the effectiveness of communicating its efforts in addressing the expo's sub-themes, sustainability, mobility, and opportunity. And Malaysia also managed very well to promote tourism. The rainforest display and daily cultural performances continued to lure very big crowds. And the Tourism, Arts and Culture Minister, Nancy Shukri, joined the team during the Malaysian Ecotourism Week. And then there was the Sarawak Tourism Board. They made their own show there about the beauty of Sarawak. And this worked very well. The outcome was very, very quick. Not just plenty of positive media coverage, but as reported by various media, a high number of travel agents in the Arab states instantly declared to include Sarawak in their tour packages. So there was a strategy there that worked, and it had, as I said before, all to do with engaging people and get them involved and create some emotional bonds. And then you talk about all the rest. I thought that was perfect.
I think that's brilliant, and I think there's something we could definitely take after from that. I just realized that I may have missed a question in the chat box. This is from Carrington. And Carrington is asking, where in Asia do you see government leaders doing a great job of balancing agility and speed with the right global context in their communication? So this is government communication.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't hear.
Where in Asia do you see government leaders doing a great job in balancing agility and speed with the right global context in their communication?
Well, I think where you live, that's a fantastic place. Singapore clearly has built enormous soft power. It's something that came up in a conversation I had with Professor Joseph Nye, who came up with a book about soft power. And he was at the Brand Finance Global Soft Power Summit, and I was able to get a question in. And I asked him, what can bigger nations learn from smaller nations like Singapore? He said, yeah, there is a lot to learn, and this is something that inspired me also, because Singapore is a very small nation, but is one that has an enormous influence on business governance across Asia and beyond, not just in Asia, also beyond. And it's one of them that manages to balance various different sides of opinions and approaches. And that is something that Asian nations typically do well. But of course, it's also about taking a stance. So you need to be clear about what you are representing, what you hold up to, what is your true belief into what the future of Asia looks like. And so they have always invested in the right industries, came up with the right governance models, and with the right messaging. And that attracts so many people. And I know that living in Singapore has become super expensive now. I follow this, but this is because it's a hugely popular place to be. Similar to Malaysia and so many other places in Asia, where people, once you get there, obviously realize it's fantastic to be here. And I know Carrington, and this is a very, very good question. And again, if I had to come up just with one name, I would come up with Singapore.
Do you think that will ever be replicated anywhere else in Asia, Oliver? What's happened and what's going on in Singapore?
Yeah, I mean, Singapore can be a blueprint for the kind of messaging, narrative development, and getting public support from various parts of the world, not just Asia, not just ASEAN, but beyond. And that is something that deserves a bit of more research, I think, for those who develop strategies that are linked to making success in other parts of the world. What can we learn? What can we learn? And as I said before, soft power is an enormously inspiring way to get support from people. Soft power is something that is not done via push, it's pull. And so in my public diplomacy chapter, I talk about the rise of Asia's public diplomacy. And this goes back decades. I mean, look at K-pop, right? I mean, BTS was invited by Joe Biden to the White House. That has never happened before, but because they were so popular. And South Korea themselves got them to appear at the United Nations General Assembly. A Korean pop group. Who has ever heard something like that? So that raises interest of the global population in learning what this can do in order to promote your country's objectives. And of course, this is something that I read when I did my research in places like the UK. There's a growing interest in learning Korean language.
Yes.
This is very interesting. Japanese as well, but also Korean, which wasn't as strong before. So again, soft power to me is something that I truly believe can make all the difference. You just need to know how to do it. Don't push, look at pull.
And talking about interest, I mean, obviously there's a huge interest in AI currently. I know ChatGPT you mentioned was launched 2 weeks before you submitted your manuscript. You spoke a bit about AI and big data, and also in enrolling technocracy in communications. Do you want to share a little bit more about that subject, and what do you think, AI or generative AI, especially in terms of its role in communications, especially in Asia?
Yeah, I received some great insights from UAE-based AI and data analytics experts, including Carrington, who's here today, and Faris Ghanem, who is running a data analytics company, and also APCO Worldwide in Dubai, because they created the Digital Lab, which is the first digital lab for communications pros, and it is actually serving clients and teams all over the world. And this deploys AI-driven solutions to build and protect the reputations of major global brands, governments, and organizations. Using AI tools deepens an understanding of what is driving customers, citizens, and users, while also defending organizations from any damage to their political or civil rank. And of course, it makes it possible to deliver more and in less time, because no human would manage to analyze such large and complex data sets from multiple sources so quickly. So while some advisors have made good progress in getting the C-suite's attention already, even the best thinkers and doers can lose that critical audience when failing to prove the return on investment that comes with improved perception, image, and reputation. The reputations may be harder to pin down, but can be retrieved from perception and sentiment data points. And the most useful systematic research starts with an evaluation of the kind of data that will have to be assessed on a regular basis, and from which sources it stems and for what purpose it is being analyzed. And the next step is then to reach a decision on what data can be collected and examined by in-house analysts. There are not too many PR agencies yet that are hiring data scientists, although some do. But, that may change though, because integrating all the data points and use natural language processing, NLP and AI to analyze and interpret data connects all dots, and that creates some competitive advantage. Oh, am I back? Yeah, I'm back. It's equally important to present the findings in the most convincing way. So that could be done via dynamic data visualization, eye-catching charts and graphs and executive summaries that make it easy for decision makers to draw actionable conclusions. So in the years ahead, all this is likely to become more entrenched across public and private sectors. And those who commit to it now will reap the rewards many times over when making reliable predictions about the public perception of corporate strategies and foreign policy, and having a foundation to base their strategies on. So spotting progress in tech and incorporating it before others do also secures the much needed buy-in from the executive board, which I talked about several times already. And it also helps to rewrite the content of job specs, reshape the questions raised in job interviews, and redefine KPIs for the next cohort of employees. And we know there are software developers like Whalio, Blackbird AI, and Propel that have already released products specifically designed for public relations, public affairs, and stakeholder communications. So anyone who hasn't really looked into that yet, now is the time to do it.
Do you think it's too soon though?
No, I don't think it's too soon.
Yeah.
I think it's time. It's time.
It's time for us to embrace it. Oliver, any last words to about your book and you know, and what you want to share to everyone who's still in session right now?
Well, the last word of the book is that, as I said, I hope it will connect with people all over the world, and also the younger and older generations. So there are some funny things in it. I quote one movie from the 1970s. I will not dig into that, but this inspired me because Paul Newman was playing a role of a key decision maker, and he was the architect of that big tower which was burning, the Towering Inferno. So you don't only need a fire chief, you also need an architect who had a strategy, and he never actually accepted the cheap wiring which caused the fire in that tower. And I thought in the end, when the fire chief talks to him in the last scene of that movie, you know, one day I hope someone will come to us and ask us how to build a tower like that. And Paul Newman says, okay, I'm asking. So I thought, oh, this is good. This is what communications pros need to do too. Go and ask, help with the development of anything that is big and changes, you know, the perception. Just so this is just one example, but as I said, I also talk about K-pop, J-pop, Asian movies, cultural diplomacy, and I hope these things get people to continue reading the book and then realize at the end, wow, now I have all the steps laid out for strategy development. But again, the approach at the end is what I call two-pronged. One is inspirational, access, agility, can-do, creativity, entrepreneurship, strategy and staff. And the other one is building and earning authority and trust. And that one lays out each and every step about how to develop strategies that work and how to do the rollout. And as I said many times, it has parts of engagement of the senior decision makers at every stage. And once you do that, You are part of the team. You are part of the decision makers, and that protects the reputation and guarantees success. I've seen it happening. This is not just my theory. It works. It does work.